Democrats are now plotting a new strategy to keep Trump off the ballot. They already lost big time 9-0 from the Supreme Court, but the court said, well, if Congress passes legislation, then I guess you can continue to be cheaters and wreck American democracy by removing your opponent from the ballot. And they said, we'd love that. That's what we wake up to do every day thinking about. And so Raskin and Swalwell are already working on this. In fact, Raskin was out talking about this in the aftermath of the Supreme Court ruling. This clip is a little bit wonky, so if you see some jittering, it's not on your end, it's on this end, but it's important what he's saying because they're already jumping into high gear, plotting away at what comes next to stop Trump. It's all they care about.
Well, the court didn't exactly disagree with it. They just said that they're not the ones to figure it out. It's not going to be a matter for judicial resolution under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, but it's up to Congress to enforce it. You know, I do agree with that interpretation just because the other parts of the 14th Amendment are self-executing. People can go to court and say that something violates equal protection, even if there's not a federal statute that allows them to do that. But in any event, the Supreme punted and said it's up to Congress to act. And so I am working with a number of my colleagues.
It's not a punt. That's
Debbie Wasserman
how it works.
And Swalwell to revive legislation that we had to set up a process by which we could determine that someone who committed insurrection is disqualified by Section 14th Amendment. And the House of Representatives already impeached Donald Trump for participating in insurrection.
And he was acquitted in the Senate.
So the House has pronounced upon that, and there was also a 57-43 vote in the Senate. The question is whether Speaker Mike Johnson would allow us to bring this to the floor of the House. Well, I think that's just a reflection of the existing electoral patchwork that we've got. There are some potential candidates who've been able to get on the ballot in some states and not other states. In some states, it's very difficult for an independent or a Green Party or a Libertarian to get on the ballot. In other states, it's much easier to get on. So that patchwork already exists. That's just a reflection of existing electoral federalism. But obviously, the Supreme Court did not want to step up to the plate and deal with the clear textualist meaning of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, much less did they want to deal with the original purposes of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which was to keep off of...
They got into some of that, but not a lot. I mean, the insertion of the text was in there in the Supreme Court opinion. We did see that they referenced the hierarchy, right? Senators, representatives, electors, and they didn't explain more about that. But Congress is the body that's most appropriate to make decisions here, and I think that's appropriate. So they're obviously scrambling to create some legislation. Here is more from Axios. It's Wasserman, it's Swalwell, it's Raskin. So they're working on it today, he said. He pointed to legislation that was introduced by Wasserman Schultz, creating a pathway for the DOJ to keep other candidates off the ballot, right? So who knows how quickly they'll get that done. We're going to revise it in light of the Supreme Court decision. So it's just plan B. Raskin suggested the bill would be paired with a resolution declaring J6 an insurrection and those involved engaged in an insurrection. Now, the bill is obviously going to face some stonewalling. Even moderate swing district Republicans like Mike Lawler are scoffing at it. It says, I don't have a lot of hope that Johnson will allow us to bring enforcement legislation to the floor, but we have to try and do it, says Raskin. He said Democrats will beseech Republicans to join the bill, but they're out of Congress. Cheney's gone. Sorry, Cheney. Crying Kinzinger, he's gone. Raskin said the bill is one on a huge list of priorities. It's something we need to focus on. So they're going to keep trying, whatever they can do to get him off. Very upset about it. Crazy Eyes Griswold also reacted to some of this. Here she was immediately after the ruling over on MSNBC, which I think is where she is auditioning for the next role if she's not prosecuted for committing her own insurrection and trying to disenfranchise the people of Colorado.
Thanks for having me on. First and foremost, I would say it's good that the court issued a decision. Americans have been voting all across the nation in early voting in those Super Tuesday states, including here in Colorado. And Coloradans and Americans deserve to know whether Trump is a qualified candidate.
We already knew.
My larger reaction is disappointment. I do believe that states should be able, under our Constitution, to bar oath-breaking insurrectionists. And ultimately, this decision leaves open the door for Congress to act to pass authorizing legislation. But we know that Congress is a nearly non-functioning body. So ultimately, it will be up to the American voters to save our democracy in November.
It's going to be up to the American voters to save our democracy. Well, because she couldn't take it away from you. She tried because Americans are too stupid, according to her. We can't, now they can trust us. Now they have to rely on us, rather. It's up to you guys. I tried to save American democracy on my own by disenfranchising you to stop you from voting for who you want to vote for. And now you have to save American democracy because I couldn't do it for you. And you have to actually go vote to do that. Go vote to save American democracy. Wild, right?
This was a unanimous decision, and it seemed pretty clear where it was going after the oral arguments.
Yeah, so how are you so wrong?
The Supreme Court. Is there anything within this decision that
do you feel bad for being so wrong?
After oral argument, I'm not too surprised. I would have liked the decision a little sooner. As of Thursday night, over 400,000 ballots were already cast in the Republican primary for president. I think the larger picture is it's as clear as day what Donald Trump did. He incited that violent mob to rush onto the Capitol to try to stop the peaceful transfer of presidential power. And his attacks and his allies' attacks on our democracy have not stopped. Their lies and disinformation have...
It's crazy that she's going to be managing the votes in Colorado. Okay, this is the person who's going to be counting them. I mean, her office.
Led to massive voter suppression efforts, to threats against election workers, and actually attacks on our election infrastructure. And they're already laying the groundwork to undermine 2024.
What are you going to do?
Regardless of this decision.
So she's going to have to fortify her elections because Republicans are already planning on stealing it. So she's going to have to steal it back.
American democracy still remains very much under attack and at threat. And this upcoming election will be crucial for democracy's survival in the United States.
Given how you see this case, given how a number of independent and some Republican voters in your state, the ones who brought this case, see Donald
so-called
Trump,
Republicans,
as you said, an oath-breaking insurrectionist. What do you make of the voters in your state?
An oath-breaking insurrectionist, 91 felony counts in 4 different jurisdictions. Like, anything else you want to add in there?
Across the country that still believe that he should be president and that he's still qualified to be president.
Ultimately, that will be a voter's decision.
Fortunately,
I think
for
there's a lot of reason for voters to look really hard at this upcoming election. And what we have seen in swing states, swing districts, that in 2018, 2020, and 2022, American voters have stepped up to safeguard American democracy. Look, this upcoming election will have a big impact on our fundamental freedoms. The idea that women should have control over our own bodies, the idea that our democracy should remain intact.
What is
and
she
some
saying?
Really basic agreement among Americans will be...
Like, if you vote for Trump, you're voting against our democracy staying intact, and you're voting against women's rights. It's like women's rights. What was she talking? Was she upset about people's rights with their bodies during the mandates?
Affected in this upcoming election. What I hope for is that Americans pay really close attention, and I am immensely hopeful and optimistic that, again, democracy will remain intact and this country will have centuries ahead of us with a strong representation.
All right, that's enough of crazy eyes. So you can see she's really, really worried about American democracy staying intact. And the best way in her mind, which was just thwarted by the Supreme Court to save democracy, was to be anti-democratic and to not have candidates on a ballot that people could vote for. So Johnson says, you know, today the Supreme Court affirmed what we all knew. Colorado and their Supreme Court, they engaged in a purely partisan attack against the frontrunner for the Republican presidential primary. That's great, Mike. You guys going to do anything about it in Congress? States engaging in the same activist, undemocratic behaviors should take notice and leave it to the American people to decide who will be president. So you should do something about it. Maybe you should form your own stupid committee illegally, because who cares, and do whatever the hell you want, because that's what they did in theirs. And you should investigate or encourage prosecutions or subpoena, whatever it is. But this is active interference with the election right now. And these people are still in charge. And Trump and his team are being prosecuted for RICO for people like Sidney Powell going and investigating criminal activity by election officials, for lawyers doing their due diligence. They got prosecuted for crimes for that. So, okay, Jenna Griswold thought that she was following the law, thought that she was, saving American democracy. That's what Sidney Powell thought. That's what Jenna Ellis thought. That's what Kenneth Chesebro thought. That's what many of them think, and they all get prosecuted regardless because they're below the law. Well, she made a mistake. She investigated this. She cost millions of dollars. She almost deviated the presidential candidate from being on the ballot. Who knows what type of harm that caused in the psyche of American voters. And she just gets to go free because she's a public servant, and she's going to run the elections in her home state, which clearly are going to be littered with bias and corruption. But Mike Johnson will probably tweet about it again, and we'll see if anything comes from it. Now, Laurence Tribe, same guy who went to Harvard, right? He's a professor over there, very smart guy. Probably hung out with Claudine Gay a lot. Says, if you read nothing else about this SCOTUS case, he posted this on January 30th, okay, his words too. It says, it's a devastating demonstration of how disgracefully dumb, okay, and anti-democratic, that's us, the pundits' case for keeping Trump's name on the ballot in the name of democracy, how truly stupid it is. So the Harvard professor says you're a big dum-dum and you're anti-democratic if you want to keep Trump on the ballot, right? And now 9-0, Supreme Court tells this Harvard law professor, you're dead wrong, all of them. And here is what he's explaining about the Democrat plot for revenge. And here is Laurence Tribe, Harvard law professor, hanging out on MSNBC reacting.
On a possible law that Congress could pass, and no one doubts that it has the power to pass it, under the part of the 14th Amendment that says Congress has the power to enforce the provisions of this amendment by all appropriate legislation. So if we imagined, and it takes quite an imagination, a Congress that was really functional with someone other than Mike Johnson as Speaker of the House who would allow a majority to work its will, we imagine a Congress that could act like a normal Congress. Then what it would do is pass a law that would provide a mechanism very much like the one that Colorado used, except it would be one for the nation as a whole, by which a would-be federal official is challenged before the election, not after the election, which would cause chaos, challenged on the ground that that official, having taken an oath to uphold the Constitution,
think they're going to do it?
Tried to overturn it by not accepting a loss when there is a fair election that tells that person your time is up, you've got to go. That would not be a very hard statute to write, except when you have a Congress that is dysfunctional and unwilling to write about just about any law that does anything. What you're basically saying is the country is hostage to someone who engaged in insurrection, and notice nothing the court said today denied the claim that Donald Trump did just that. They leave that question open. When you have someone who tried to overthrow the Constitution by saying, I may have lost the election, but I'm going to figure out a way to stay in power
That's
anyway.
not what he did.
That person
Laurence
can try again. And belief of the authors of the 14th Amendment that allowing voters to get basically snookered into giving that sort of person power is not an adequate remedy. You need to disqualify such a person. But if Congress can't get its act together, then the person can just ride on the fake information that he or she may propound in order to get elected.
They're so mad. Oh, they're so mad. They are not happy about that. He's just going to ride on this fake propaganda all the way back into the White House. And so you can see what they're doing. They're trying to craft up some legislation. They do not want Trump to win, just as a temporary speed bump for them. Raskin and Swalwell, you can almost guarantee they'll draft some legislation. And this will probably be something that we see more of. Maybe they get Ken Buck or somebody to join them. And the margins are pretty small. They say, we have the votes. Speaker Johnson, take this to the House if you care so much. And remember, my friends, wasn't Matt Gaetz and wasn't Elise Stefanik considering a resolution at some point? Like, what happens if they bring a resolution? You know, that's not really something that I'm real comfortable with either. So Congress, they seemingly can't get anything done except when it's not in favor of Trump. And suddenly they're all unified. Like most of them shut up about J6 or whatever, right? They all, oh no, let the courts play out. Justice Department's great. So they all can seemingly move pretty quickly when it's to the detriment of Trump. We'll see if that changes here, but they'll never stop, right? They're plotting away. We're going to be here continuing to cover it, my friends. Thank you for joining us as we do. I love when you subscribe. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for liking this video. Thanks for checking out some of the links down in the description below. We got other cool stuff, including our members only community at watchingthewatchers.locals.com, which is where we do our member only streams in the morning and our after parties. We'd love to see you over there and back here on the next one.